Now, this week, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, set up by the multi-billionaire and his wife, announced several £100 million worth of funding for family planning programmes in some of the world's poorest countries. The plan, supported by the British government, is to reduce unwanted pregnancies and help prevent the spread of disease. While the cause may not seem unusual, what is surprising is that Melinda Gates is a Catholic, a church which has long been against the use of any contraception. Melinda says she's optimistic the Pope will change his views.
We have a shared mission around social justice and anti-poverty. And I think what this Pope sees is that if we are going to lift people out of poverty, you have to do the right thing for women. And so we have agreed at this point to disagree.
Well, the Pope shows no sign of fulfilling Melinda Gates' hopes, but should the Catholic Church change its stance on contraception? Well, joining us now are Obianuju Ekiocha, a Catholic campaigner for the promotion of African values, Danielle Spencer, who is an international aid worker, Claire Short, Catholic blogger and writer, and Amy Lavelle, a journalist and feminist. Uju, the money being made available will help women take control of their lives and the size of their families. Surely that is a positive step, particularly in terms of poverty.
I'm sure Melinda Gates means well, but you see, the problem is there is an arrogance and something in what I see as questions not being asked in all this talk about contraception and helping women to space their children is what exactly, when speaking of Africa, for example, what exactly do women want? In most of the African countries, you get to find, as research continues to show all the time, that African women, in a lot of the countries, African women's desire or desired number of children is actually quite high. So in cultures where people, for example, value children or value big families, what are you saying to the women if you continue to push their governments towards the so-called family planning projects? Not that people are not spacing their children, is that this might be indeed an insidious way of moving the agenda of population control.
So family planning projects in developing countries are bad?
No, I'm not saying...
Or there are Western countries forcing their values.
Exactly. I'm not saying they're bad in and of themselves, but I'm saying that there is a real problem with a multi-billionaire from the Western country coming in to tell African governments what to do or how to control populations.
Danielle, you're looking quite puzzled there as you were listening. What's your response to that?
Well, I think it's an interesting perspective, but ActionAid is slightly different, I think, from maybe the traditional model of NGO work. We work with grassroots women's rights organisations and we deliver what they ask us to deliver. And they're asking us to deliver family planning. In our most recent report, we talked with a woman called Evelyn. Evelyn risked domestic violence, she risked abuse from her husband in order to take contraception in secret, because in the health system in Liberia, where she's from, it was apparent that she had to go with her husband in order to receive contraception, and there was a disagreement within that family. Now, her husband was violent. 1 in 3 women experience sexual or physical violence at the hands of most likely at the hands of an intimate partner. Reproductive coercion is a real issue, and we need to be able to not leave those women behind.
And we talk about birth control. What about disease?
Well, when we talk about disease, ActionAid is really a women's rights organisation, so we're really about choice. So if women have the choice, then obviously, disease and spread of disease would go down. But fundamentally, we're not talking about population control. We're not talking about economics here. We're talking about women's right to choose whether to have a child. And that's very difficult for a huge number of women who are in violent relationships.
Uju's shaking her head. We'll come to you in just a moment,
That's
Claire.
okay.
I want to bring you in because isn't it about time the Pope changed the Catholic stance on contraception?
Well, it's interesting because whenever we get into the contraception debate, you've got the artificial contraception side saying that this is a women's issue. And do you know what? It's just not, OK? The way the Catholic Church approaches it is that it's a couple's issue. And this is really, really important because artificial contraception, what they say is that all the responsibility is on the woman's shoulders. And the Catholic Church disagrees with that. They think it should be an equal held responsibility between the husband and the wife.
But what about when you don't have an equal relationship? I mean, the situation that Danielle's talking about, when you have maybe an abusive husband.
Yeah, so this is really difficult. Obviously, relationships like that are bad, and the woman needs to be brought into a safe place. Yeah, but by giving her contraception, all you're doing is allowing her to remain in that abusive situation. It does not solve the problem. So you need to be tackling the problem. And where NFP comes in, natural family planning with the Catholic Church, what that teaches is not only about empowering the women to understand their physiology, to understand their fertility and how their bodies work, but also to educate the husbands as to how the woman's body works, you know. And it is built on the relationship, and the effect it has on the relationship is equally as important. So it's coming in with all of these really good positive things.
Amy, if it's a fundamental sort of core value of the Catholic Church, he's asking a bit too much to get a change, isn't it?
I don't think so. I think that, you know, the Pope has been progressive on so many issues, and even on contraception. He has said that it's not an absolute sin to prevent it.
When?
In the Joy of Love, he's commented on to reporters since.
He did
but
not
I think
say
When,
that.
what exactly did he say? When
absolutely
exactly
did
did
not
he
say
say it? Because
that.
I don't think he did.
OK, let's hear from Amy.
he said, and I saw in a comment he said to reporters that he said it's not an absolute thing, and also to put it on the merits between the couple's conscience. But to disagree with what you're saying, I think it is a woman's issue because, I mean, yes, it's a part of the couple's relationship to be able to decide when and if they get pregnant. But I think ultimately it is on the woman's, it's a woman's body that goes through this, and it should be the woman that has a bit more control over it.
Can I just jump in there? I think that, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
I think it is a woman's choice, and especially when you're looking at violence. And actually the church itself has a huge role to play in talking about women's rights. I've worked with religious leaders from multiple faiths in talking about women's rights, empowering women. But you know, when we worked with Evelyn, as an example, we did actually work with her husband as well. They've negotiated a smaller family as a result. He's on board with the contraception. He's, you know, when we worked with her in 2012, she wasn't allowed out of the house. And now he's encouraging her to go out and talk to other women and other men about contraception.
Okay,
So that is
let's
good.
get another take on this. Emma, he's been speaking to someone?
We were just talking about religious leaders, and Catholic priests are on the front line when dealing with couples and contraception. Just before we came on air, I spoke to Father Paddy McCafferty from Corpus Christi Parish in Belfast. Father Paddy, as a parish priest, how much does the issue of contraception come up, and what do you say to those who raise it with you?
To be honest with you, it doesn't come up very, very often at all. In fact, very, very rarely. I've been a priest now for 28 years, and I could nearly count on one hand the number of occasions this has arisen as an issue of any type of issue at all.
I think that's quite interesting, though, to hear. I mean, some people may be surprised to learn that. Is what you're saying really, then, that there's a kind of turning of a blind eye to this issue, that you let your members of your congregation do what they feel they can, and then you just don't really talk about it?
No, I don't think that's the issue at all, because we maintain the teaching. The teaching is a difficult one, and in the modern age, it is a very unpopular one, obviously, and it's a difficult one to explain. But because a thing is difficult, it doesn't mean that we abolish it or that we turn a blind eye to it. The teaching is what it is, and even though it's challenging, even though it demands from people a certain discipline and a commitment, I do believe that it's a very valuable teaching. I believe it's a prophetic teaching.
Melinda Gates, the philanthropist who's been in the UK this week for a family planning summit, is hopeful, and she herself is a Catholic, I should add, she is hopeful that the Pope will change the Catholic Church's position on contraception. What do you think?
No, I don't believe we should change a teaching simply because it's difficult. Obviously, the teaching and the pastoral practice of the Church essentially is informed by compassion for the person, the struggles of people, their difficulties. That all being said, the teaching itself is valuable. The teaching, I believe, is prophetic in the modern times, where there is a very promiscuous, permissive attitude to human sexuality in general, and in particular the whole contraceptive mentality and ideology. I think that the Church's teaching is still very valuable and needs to be maintained.
Father Paddy, thank you so much. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
So, Father McCafferty is saying that, Amy, that the Church's teaching is valid and it needs to be maintained. It's fair enough, isn't it?
Well, I think you need to update it. I think it's a very modern world, and you need to work with the issues that we are facing. There are lots of women that, that we're not talking about promiscuity, we're talking about sex within a marriage. But I mean, I personally know women who've had a number of children have now been told they can't have any more without risking their lives. And I think you need to be able to address women like that and say, yes, you have a choice. You need to be able to protect yourself and the lives of your unborn children as well.
Uju, we're basing this on thoughts and sayings from 1968.
No.
Surely that's out of date and we need to move on.
No, actually, Sean, you are basing this particular thing, or what's going on right now, you're basing it on the Western view to human sexuality and to marriage or the attitude towards sex. There is a problem where the Western world, or people within the Catholic Church in the Western world, continue to try to push the agenda or their viewpoint on a church that is supposed to be universal, on a church that actually since 1980, Africa has had the most tremendous growth with more than 200...
And a huge amount of poverty.
Tremendous growth in...
And a huge...
No, but also there is a reduction of poverty. There has been a reduction of poverty in the percentage. There has been. And there are emerging markets in Africa. There are parts of Africa that people don't get to show.
Parts of Africa, parts of Africa not.
The problem is that Africa, what the world continues, what we continue to see from news stations, media, Western media, will be the parts of Africa that seems to be very weak. But no one is talking about the emerging markets in Africa. No one is talking about the way the Africans see the family. No one is talking about how Africans understand marriage and things like that. But there is a problem when people from the Western world continue to push their worldview on a church that is supposed to be universal. It is a problem. And the church in Africa is a vital church, it's a vibrant church. It is a church that has grown since 1980. If people didn't like the teachings, then the church would not have been growing as it is. It's grown more than 200%. I have to say, why would Melinda Gates,
many would say,
why would a woman who is Western, and just because she's wealthy, try to push her worldview on a church that is supposed to be universal?
Many would say that's modern-day imperialism. Emma, people have been getting in touch?
Well, it's heated over here. It's heated online as well. Elizabeth says religious teachings have no relevance in the modern world and should not influence governmental policy on contraception or anything else. Irvin says the Catholic Church should be delivering the best teaching to us. It overlooks the role of sex as an act for its own sake, which cements relationships together. The prohibition on condoms makes no sense. Elaine, the Church is well aware that people are using contraception, and I suspect they also understand. Marion says, go look around the world at all those poor children dying one after another from starvation. The Catholic Church preaches no contraception. Why don't you sell your many priceless treasures and feed them? And Nola, pretty uncompromising. The teaching will not change. It is time for those who do not want to be Catholic to just leave the faith.
Oh, strong stuff there. But Danielle, let's bring this back to Melinda Gates. Okay. She says she's going to agree to disagree with the Pope, but imagine the Pope was able to change things in the Catholic Church. What would that mean?
Well, it would mean a great deal to many women within the Catholic Church and also outside of the Catholic Church as well. The Catholic Church.
What difference would it make?
It would mean that they would have the right to choose. But, I mean, bringing it back to what's been discussed today, I think we need to also kind of bear in mind that there are 700 million women and girls alive today who'd marry as a child. It's not just about intimate partner violence. It's not just about other issues of violence, but children don't have a pelvis that's fully formed, and yet they're marrying, they're having children, and they're dying.
Can we 25 just child marriage?
We should, but we should
fight child marriage.
Putting them on the pill isn't going to keep them safe,
but we can't do it like that. And so, in order to prevent children dying.
Then that's Band-Aid.
Okay,
that's a Band-Aid.
Uju and Danielle, I'm going to give the last word to Claire. What would you like to see?
One really, really important point here that nobody's discussed yet is that nobody really understands. Nobody here, you clearly don't. You're not a Catholic, and that's, I don't blame you for that. Melinda Gates says she's a Catholic. I don't believe she's practising. She clearly doesn't understand the teaching. Nobody has actually explained what the Catholic Church teaching is on sex and marriage. And there is so much prejudice that we have to put up with as Catholics, because people do not take the time to learn what the proper teaching is and see how it empowers the woman, see how it empowers the marriage and enhances the marriage. And it is a good and beautiful teaching. I've lived the contraception lifestyle. I lived it for many years. I have lived the NFP lifestyle. And I can tell you that there is no comparison.
Thank you very much. We'll end it on that. Thank you to all of you.